Aloha and welcome. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about function stubs. So we've talked before about software development as being an incremental process. In other words, it's a process that we do piece by piece. We've talked about how if you write everything at once and you try to make it and then run it, you're going to have errors. It's going to be hard to figure out where it is that you have your errors and everything. So we talk about building it iteratively and incrementally. We build it in small parts. So the process is we'll build a little bit, we'll test it, we'll fix the bugs that we find, and then we'll repeat the process. We'll do this over and over and over until we have a functioning program. So while we're doing this, we build sections, or we determine, oh, we're going to need to have this section over here, but we may not flesh it out and build it. So we have something to help us out with that. We have what we call function stubs. So you can have a piece of functionality you plan to create later, but you'll just put a little placeholder in there for it. We call that a function stub. So a function stub, you'll have the definition of the function, and then the next line, we often use just the statement pass. And pass basically means to just go over it. So it gives it a functional, it's a placeholder essentially. So we'll just go into the function and then just do nothing. So that works in some situations. Sometimes you want the function to alert the user to the fact that this section of functionality isn't created yet. So instead of a pass, we'll put in a print statement. And a print statement will say something like, hey, this functionality isn't created yet. We'll be making this next. Sometimes if you're dealing with a mathematical computation, we do things like we'll just return a -1. Just kind of a standard return value for unfinished functionality in that sense. So we'll put in the return of -1 in those types of functions. So sometimes though you don't want to, you want to basically raise an awareness and stop the functioning if it causes, if you've got something that's not implemented yet, it's going to cause a problem in the running of it, you'll actually raise an error. And that's going to be something we talk about errors later on, but just to let you know, we use there's a keyword raise, and then there's you can use one of many different types of errors after that to stop the functionality of the program, and it'll tell the user that, hey, we've got a problem here. So I'm going to share some of the code that I've just mentioned in VS Code. So let's pull that up right here. So I've created something called do something later, and I'm using just a pass. So this is essentially going to do nothing. And then we've got do this later too. And this is the situation that I talked about where we kind of want to let them know, hey, we're going to make this later. Or, it's a reminder to the programmer maybe that, hey, we need to still create this later. And then an example of a numeric function that's not implemented yet, where we're returning -1. And then we've got one called flag error if this is run. And that's where I talked about the raise keyword with the not implemented error keyword here. And it says up here, you can look, it says class not implemented error method or function hasn't been implemented yet. So this is the error type that you would raise. So I'm going to test this out. To do something later, if we run this, we should get absolutely nothing, which is exactly what happens. Nothing is output. If we comment that out and we uncomment this, do this later too, this is the one that will at least be kind, and it tells us, hey, we need to flesh this part out later. So that's great. It let us know that we're missing something there. So if we're expecting something and nothing happened, we would have thought that weird, so it lets us know. Then we have an example of a numeric function to be implemented, and if we run it, it's not going to do anything, but if we were to actually print the value that comes out of here, we can see what it should be, which is -1. So we hit play, play, and we've got -1 is the result. And now here's the interesting one. So if we uncomment the last one and we run it, flag error if this is run. Let's see what happens here. First of all, let's clear this out to make it nice and clean. And we hit the play, and boom, that's what happens. It tells us that line 16 calls on something at line 11. It raises the, inside this function, it raises the not implemented error. and it gives us the not implemented error, which is exactly what we expect. So you can handle these function stubs in different ways. You can simply do nothing. You can put out a message for your user. You can, if it's a mathematical function, you can return a -1, or you can raise an error if needed. But these are the different ways for handling functionality that you're going to implement in a later iteration. So that's the extent of this section, and we'll talk a little bit more in the next about functions. So stay tuned.